He got hit in front of 12 other people in first class. 3 crew members, and a man who hadn't said a word since getting on the plane. But no one, not even she, knew that that one slap would cause $880 million to freeze 5 minutes later. Sky North's flights would be canceled at 6 foreign airports. The man she hit would never ever raise his voice. Help us figure out where you are, because what comes next will make an airplane quiet down. It began with a place to sit. First class from JFK to Zurich? Clayton Duvall didn't walk quickly. He moved slowly, which was a trait of only some men. The kind that didn't have anything to prove. He wore a stylish brown coat that was lined with wool, but was old. The sewing was done by hand, and there was a dark gray scarf folded in half and put inside. It wasn't brand new, but his suitcase was clean. Even though his shoes didn't have a brand label on them, they were clean, and his gait was steady. Money is carried by some people, and things gifts. Clayton kept the peace. The flight attendant, Rachel, a young white woman, looked up from her list and stopped moving right away. She looked over Clayton like a scanner, trying to find something that didn't make sense. He gave a soft smile and pointed to the space above seat 1A in the overhead box. She took a step forward and blocked his way with her hand. She asked in a strong but fake voice, "Excuse me, sir? May I see your boarding pass?" Clayton gave it without saying anything. Rachel held it was too long, so she turned it over, checked the barcode and looked up again, her face split into 2 parts, smile and doubt. "I believe a mistake has been made. This is top-notch," Clayton spoke in a calm tone. "He didn't move when I told him, sir. I just need to D-block check with the gate agent. Can you step back, please?" He had flown this airline 6 times in the last 3 years and sat in the same seat each time, so it wasn't because he was being cranky. Looks-wise, not the pause or the assumption that no one voiced. He cocked his head. "Something wrong?" Rachel still had her hand out. "Normal checks. We're done. Please wait by the wall." People in the area had begun to watch. A man in 2C moved in a strange way. A woman in 3A whispered to her husband with her eyes wide open. Clayton slowly raised his briefcase to the ceiling. Rachel lost it at that point. She charged at him and hid his hand away. "Open your hand." Even though it wasn't strong enough to hurt, the force was meant to make fun of. She missed, though. She didn't hit his hand. She hit him in the face. The walls of the shack echoed with a sharp, hollow crack. It's that sound that stops everything. The air stopped moving. Clayton did not move. He didn't swear. He didn't even move. Didn't look at her angry or even surprised. Just looked at her with that blank look that makes everyone nearby feel something. Rachel fell backwards. She turned to face the kitchen and said, "I thought he was aggressive. Didn't care. Protocol." No one stood by her. A voice from 3B broke the silence. Turned away, reached into his coat pocket, and took out a small, matte black device. "Lady, we all saw that. He didn't do anything. There was only one biometric strip. No brand or screen." He put his thumb on it. A soft green light flashed. After that, it got dark. Rachel made a face. He didn't answer when I asked, "What is that?" He went back to seat 1A and took a seat. "I think I'll take that water now," he stated. Rachel didn't move. Behind her, the co-pilot walked into the cabin. His face was blank with confusion, and his headset seemed to be breaking. 5,000 meters below in Geneva. At the GEMCOR order, alarms began to go off. SkyNorth's route ethic mark was just taken away. Within minutes, Zurich, Vienna, and Frankfurt airports stopped clearing people coming in. As a safety measure, Heathrow, Schiphol, and Geneva stopped all SkyNorth check-ins. There was an ethics breach at the airline by ESG funds that manage A-to-A delos and investments. 3 within an hour, foreign booking sites took the carrier off their lists. Clayton Duvall reached into his coat and took out a letter that was crisp. Handwritten and folded only once. He was back in 1A. He didn't open it, just put it on his lap, waited, and straightened out the edges. Rachel wasn't moving. The guests also didn't have it. It had been 2 minutes since the slap. They just didn't understand yet. The slap wasn't the real story, though. Quiet that followed was, the plane was still on the runway, but no one was talking in first class. Rachel She ran into the kitchen while holding the manifest as if it could protect her from what she had done. The rest of the guests didn't say anything because they weren't sure whether to speak up or keep quiet. People were scared because they didn't know who the man in seat 1A was. There was no need for Clayton Duvall to talk. He did not move. He looked at the folded letter on his lap as if it were more important than anyone else in the cabin. A woman from 2 rows back, Lynetto, her husband, in a whisper, "Did she just hit him?" "I think so, but why is he so calm?" Clayton saw an older woman in 2A, watching him closely out of the corner of his eye. With her gray curls tucked into a blue scarf and a string of pearls around her neck. She looked to be in her 70s. Her eyes looked like they had seen some things. Other people flinched, but she didn't. She leaned in a little and asked, "Are you okay, sir?" In a strong voice. Turned around and met her. "Look," and then nod. She took a moment to think, then said, "I'm fine, thank you." "You handled that with an ease I haven't seen in a long time." He gave a weak smile. "It gets better with age and experience." She leaned back and looked over at the kitchen. "She is young and scared now?" Clayton looked at it with wonder. Not only what she did should scare her, but also what she is a part of. She turned her head to the side. "You're not just another guest, right?" He didn't answer. Instead, he looked at thought about the small black gadget he had put back in his coat pocket. It was now cool on the fingerprint pad, but the signal had already been recorded in a computer room below Geneva. Route mark was taken away. SkyNorth Airlines does not meet the GEM compliance tier. It would take 4 minutes for the system to handle the withdrawal. The time had run out. 10 hours before, Swiss town of Montreux. Clayton stood by the lake early in the morning and watched the sun come up over the Alps. The water sparkled and was calm, not affected by the chaos going on around. It, behind his simple 2-story log home, stood still for him. Every book and picture inside is set up for a reason. Over the last 10 years, he had spent this time away from the news, power, and noise. He made GEM, the global ethics mesh, to be quiet. Not a way to gain power, but a wall against crime. It was used by governments, ESG funds, insurance groups, airline regulators, and digital compliance boards all did the same thing. Even so, Clayton Duvall was the only one who had the final verification. Further, he hadn't used it in 10 years, not once to fight back until now. He read the letter from the Zurich Civil Aviation Authority again when he got back to his study. Not to support GEM, but to talk about what happens when a system meant to protect people is used to keep them out instead. They asked him to speak again at the annual summit. He had put a red line through one statement. There is still bias in the hands that hold the power, even with technology. That morning, when he put his suitcase away, he only there are 2 things. This is the letter from Zurich, and the device that could quickly shut down a flight. Now, we're back on the plane. Clayton took a quick look at his watch. It's almost time. A tall, angry man from business class walked into first class and yelled, "What's going on here? Why hasn't this plane moved?" "I have a meeting in London." Rachel came back and tried to calm him down. "Sir, please go back to your seat. There's just a small problem with the proof." Clayton stood up, slightly toward the man, and replied in a calm voice, "I think you should sit down, sir. Things are going to change soon." The man laughed. "Who the hell do you think you are? Feel safe?" Rachel didn't answer. It's time she looked at Clayton for a longer time. Something about him made her feel uneasy that she hadn't noticed before. He wasn't just calm, he was in charge. She cleared her throat, leaned in close to Rachel, and said, something loud enough for everyone in the row to hear, Who did you just hit?" Rachel took a quick blink. "He made the system that lets your plane know if it can fly in Europe." Rachel laughed because she was too scared to take what was said seriously. No change had been made by Clayton. He opened the folded letter on his lap and saw that it was an invitation to the Zurich summit. His name was clearly written on it. He is the founder and chief ethics engineer of Global Ethics Mesh and is also the guest of honor. Rachel's smile fell away. People strained their necks, were already foam-staking notes. Clay stood there at that time. When he looked at Rachel, his voice became heavy for the first time. not loud but hard to miss. You didn't just treat me badly. You were rude to 40 years of work. You treated badly every person your airline has quietly turned away. That will now be fixed by the system. Rachel opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Clayton looked at the people who were sitting down. Sorry about the wait, but sometimes it takes longer to do what's right. He then sat down again. At that exact moment, somewhere in Geneva, the GEM dashboard was updated. Sky North's moral level was taken away. The compliance state is not valid. What should be done? Global hold. All Sky North gates at Zurich Airport were stopped in 90 seconds. All flight clearances were locked in Geneva, Heathrow, Schiphol, and Vienna. All said that the airline was likely to break ethical rules. 80 Millers and ESG-backed funds were locked up. 3 ESG banks said that the airline did not follow the rules. Sky North's internal chat logs started going crazy. When Clayton got back to the cabin, he looked ahead and was calm. Rachel said something into her mic. Captain, we might be in a tough spot, can we? That is there a way to the voice of the captain came over the speaker? It was tense and stiff. As you can see, there is an unexpected delay across the whole system from our control center. We'll let you know soon. He took a deep breath and looked at the folded letter one more time. If you want real power, don't shout it. It's when people whisper your name behind closed doors. That was something his late wife told him. He never liked that quote, but it worked today. The woman in Tua gave him a soft smile. I knew your name, she said. Do you remember what you said at Oxford? Clayton had a smile on his face after the mining scandal in South Africa. She leaned in a long time ago. What will happen next? His answer was, now let the system speak. At exactly 10:04 a.m., 6 red alert screens lit up in the office on the 47th floor of Sky North's Manhattan headquarters. The new CEO, the head of law, the head of operations, and the chief financial officer, all of them, looked at the live compliance monitor. One word flashed in bright red across the middle, waved. During that time, no one spoke. Then Mario lost it. What the hell is GEM? And why does it say we're breaking the rules? The space became even less noisy. They knew what GEM was. That's not the case. They didn't believe it would ever happen to them. Ivy Tran, the general counsel, rose her glasses and gave a straight answer. She was in her early 40s and as sharp as a razor. GEM is the whole world's moral mesh. It makes sure that 38 countries follow ESG rules when they get institutional support and when it comes to aviation. Jonas laughed. So, an ethics nerd let us know. Ivy looked at the screen and said, no, sir. It's not a flag. This is a revocation at the bottom level. Jonas made a face. Please speak English. Our signature was just taken away by someone very high up, most likely Clayton Duvall himself. Every partner system in the GEM network now thinks, we're not following the rules. What does that mean? It means no one can take you up. Clayton went back to his seat in 1A and looked out the small oval window to see 2 cars slowly move toward the plane. He didn't move. He just folded the letter from Zurich again and put it back in his bag. Rachel hadn't come back since the captain made that awkward comment. Another flight attendant, this one older and calmer, was now standing next to the kitchen. She kept looking at Clayton and then at her earpiece, which meant she was clearly getting orders that were above her level of responsibility. In the second row, the old woman leaned in again toward Clayton. They still believe this is about a place? He gave a small nod. They haven't felt the ground move yet. Going back to GMHQ in Geneva, Switzerland. A tall lady in a navy blazer stood in front of a digital wall of flow-through data streams in GEM's nerve center. Her name was Marianne Corday, and she was in charge of running GEM. She was sure of who had caused the route revocation. Plus, she knew that once Clayton turned it on, no one, not even her, could turn it off without his THUMB per takeover. She looked at her chief of protocol. What does the echo mean? Asset freeze right away on holdings that are linked to ESG. Heathrow, Zurich, Geneva, and Vienna. Full Sky North stop. Partner sites like Clairjet and AirNet have taken them off their lists. Effects on others. 3 companies that use Sky North's back-end code are being warned because they are linked. To them, in 6 networks, over 880 mounts and secured assets were harmed. Janet let out a sigh. The police officer then shook his head. Still in the air. He hasn't moved. Marianne smiled. Of course not. He wants to let the machine talk first. She took a step closer to the screen and whispered in a way that was almost religious. He always said that the best proof would be silence. Go back in time 6 years. Zurich was quiet on a spring afternoon. Clayton was in a private eating room with 3 well-dressed men from Attendant Ventures, a global fund that makes money by buying infrastructure and then selling control of it. Their goal was to buy all of GM. They gave him an offer of $2.4 billion and a seat on the ethics board of advisors. In less than 30 seconds, he said no. He said, I built gems so no one could own it, not even I. That's why I have the root. That way, if someone ever thinks they can change the system, they will see that it doesn't bend. It's them reflecting in it. They were mad when they left the meeting. After a month, GEM became the standard for foreign aviation funding, and Clayton never agreed to go to another dinner party. Come back to the present. Jonas Merrill, CEO of Sky North HQ, was stepping now. So it was like, we're dead in the water, he said. We've got 94 flights scheduled across EU corridors today. What happens when Zurich, Heathrow, and Vienna all lock us out? Ivy didn't respond. She already had a text message with someone at the FAA. After that, her phone rang 3 times. Her eyes got bigger. Jonas asked, "What?" The screen was shown to him. The email's subject line said, "Subject board override motion, emergency ethics breach response." Below that, it listed all of Sky's jobs. North foreign clearances were put on hold. FAA wants an emergency check of compliance. GM listing Tier 0 is not suitable. Sky North capital items can't be traded anymore as of right now. Jonas cursed quietly. Call that person. Ivy let out a sigh. Sir, you can't just call Clayton Duvall, then track his damn assistant. Lawyer, banker, janitor, someone, sir. Ivy looked hard now. Those are not his. In the Swiss Alps, he lives by himself. Not a press and no managers. Jim was made just for you, to not be pushing. If he did move, it was because your worker told him to. Jonas stopped moving. Rachel, he said. Oh my God. In the air. It's been 34 minutes since the hit. The captain went into first class. Behind him, the door to the cockpit stayed open. He seemed tired and tense. He looked right at Clayton and didn't move. Sir, he spoke softly. I just got word from corporate that they want us to take off all first-class passengers and start over with the manifest. This is only a temporary situation. Nothing personal, Clayton said with a calm voice and a look up. Dapton, I think you should wait 5 more minutes. Ellis took a quick blink. Why does that happen? Since your systems will have crashed by then, it'll be impossible to book anything and someone on your law team will finally figure out who I am. Ellis tried to ease the stress with a soft laugh. No offense meant, but Clayton again reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a folded sheet. It wasn't the letter from Zurich. It was a meeting of the Federal Aviation Administration. He signed his name in blue ink under the header and put a date and stamp on it. Clayton E. Duvall is one of the founders of GEM Framework and its ethics creator. The captain spoke, then closed his mouth. The co-pilot's headset cracked again behind him. Zurich took our spot. Geneva tells us that we're cold, not able to check in. Ellis, the captain, gulped. What the heck is going on? It was almost nice of Clayton to answer. The plane won't be going, and it's not your fault, Captain. You won't be able to see what your whir line has been hacked. He then leaned back in his chair, put his hands together, and didn't say anything else. 2 people on board had already put video of the plane online 42 minutes into its gate hold. One was from a communications major college student sitting in 3A. This was the message. The other person, a woman in 2D, had been live streaming quietly ever since she saw Rachel's hand touch Clayton's face. Both videos were not changed. They didn't need to be. They told a story that didn't need any describe. A calm black man showing his flight pass, a white flight attendant who was yelling, then a hit. It's clear, sharp, and on purpose. All eyes were on them at that moment. The video first showed up in niche places like Airline Justice, Flight Fails, and even a Facebook group called First Class Citizens. But by 11:02 a.m., it had reached Ethics Wire, a popular Twitter X account with 1.8 million users that is known for bringing attention to unfair systems. The comment that made it go crazy came next. Shepished, a man out of first class. He had the kill switch for 6 airports, but she didn't know that. In just a few minutes, hashtag Clayton Duvall became the 3rd most popular song in the US. TripAdvisor gave Sky North only 1.2 stars. In Europe, the number of canceled reservations went up by 14%. Clay still hadn't said anything. When they got back on the plane, the cabin was eerily quiet. Captain Ellis locked the door to the wheelhouse again to try to keep things calm, while he waited for legal approval from headquarters. Rachel, who looked pale and shook up, stood by the kitchen with tears in his red eyes. She didn't have her badge or computer anymore. Carla, the older flight attendant, had taken them off gently 20 minutes earlier with a simple word. They want you to stay out of this until it is looked over again. Rachel had said yes, confused. She was now sitting in the jump seat next to the bathroom in the back, her hands clasped between her knees and a little shaking. People on the train stopped being interested in her. They looked down their noses at her. A few took pictures. A woman in the 6th row whispered, "That's the I can't believe she's still on the plane," muttered a man near the wall. Rachel didn't hear him at all. She didn't fight back. She knew in her heart that the moment had been about more than just a spot. It had to do with power, assumptions, and being wrong in front of the wrong man. In Washington, D.C., the top ethics officer for the Federal Aviation Administration made a secure call to the headquarters of GEM in Geneva. Marianne Corday herself took it. "Hello, this is Selwyn from the FAA's International Compliance Division. My name is Marianne. We need to have an official meeting. A committee in the Senate is already putting pressure on us. They want to know if the GEM removal is actual law." The answer came right away from Marianne. "It's not only legally binding, but it can't be taken back unless Mr. Duvall fixes the name himself." Selwyn yawned. "This means he is the root signer." Marianne took a break. He made the company, not just signed it. GEM was made from his building a personal ethics code. He is the only one who can override Tier 0 revocations, and there is no way to argue. There has never been one. That's what she said. There is no boardroom, bribery, or backdoor in this method, making it the only one in the airplane world. A young man in a business suit and AirPods tapped Clayton on the shoulder at exactly 11:22 a.m. His voice was soft. "Sir, my name is Malik, and I work as an associate at Adeline Partners, an ESG fund. I just wanted to say, thank you, Clayton. I saw what happened. I work with the underwriting team that makes sure fleet operations follow ethics. I never thought I'd meet the man who built GEM on a flight like this." Clayton and I both gave a small smile. Another voice spoke up. "Sir, would it be okay if I shook your hand?" asked a woman from 3A. "I don't mean to bother you. My dad works with Transworld Airports. He always said that your framework kept bad actors out of critical lanes." I didn't answer. Clayton gently shook her hand. There was no big speech or press crew, just a handshake. It was a sign that people still knew what silent power looked like. At Executive ESG Crisis, Mark VP Strategy, we're being eaten alive online. IV Tran Legal. FAA is demanding statement by EOD. GEM won't return our messages. Jonas Merrill, CEO. Does anyone have a personal link to Clayton Duvall? PR manager, nothing direct. The guy's a ghost. Legal assistant. Once last year, he was denied an ethics review waiver for discrimination training for cabin crew. "Jonas, you what?" the legal assistant asked. "We'll handle ethics our way," he replied. "Jonas, you slapped a man who wrote the rules." There was silence in the chat. By 11:30 a.m., the decision had to be made right away. Captain Ellis walked out into the cabin and greeted Clayton again. "Sir," he said, "we're hearing that the flight may be canceled. Zurich and Geneva are officially closed to Sky North." Clayton put his coat across his lap and said, "I understand. Would you be willing to speak to our HQ? You're asking for a statement?" Clayton looked him straight in the eye and said, "Captain, I said nothing when I was slapped, when I was doubted, and when the system froze their money, and now they want a quote." He leaned in a little and said, "My statement is the silence they ignored, and now the world can hear it." Captain Ellis gave a slow nod and said, "I understand." Aerolite, Skybridge, and Euroflight, which shared ethics APIs with SkyNorth, were flagged for exposure. Within 30 minutes, 880 mound loans turned into 1.1 B in frozen capital. Several ESG lenders announced ethics review moratoriums, which stopped all pending credit reviews for the whole airline cluster. At 12:14 p.m., the New York Stock Exchange stopped trading SkyNorth. On the tarmac at JFK, the plane that never took off became a symbol of a system gone wrong. The plane began to take off quietly, with no announcements or fanfare. Clayton was the last person to get off. He picked up his briefcase, adjusted his scarf, and walked down the jet bridge alone. Rachel never looked at him. Other passengers silently moved aside to give him space. And somewhere in the terminal, a child watching through a window asked his mother, "Mom, who was that man?" The man who told the truth without saying a word was that one. The next Tuesday, Clayton Duvall's silence could be heard in halls far from the tarmac of Flight 7-5 at 9 a.m. Eastern. The Senate Aviation Subcommittee met in Washington, D.C. Reporters sat in the gallery with their notepads poised and camera shutters clicking. Like a staccato heartbeat, cell phone screens flickered among the rows of spectators. On the dais sat Senator Helen Ramirez, who was known for being tough and having a history of going after corporate cover dash-ups, along with FAA and SkyNorth representatives. There was an empty seat set aside for Clayton Duvall. "Ladies and gentlemen," Senator Ramirez began, his voice commanding and warm, "we're here today because a single slap on an airplane has exposed a systemic failure, one that threatens not only passenger dignity, but also the integrity of our aviation industry." There was a murmur in the chamber and on the screens behind the Ds. Clips from the first-class cabin played over and over again. Rachel's open palm touching, "We will hear testimony from the FAA's International Compliance Division, from SkyNorth's CEO, Jonas Merrill, and if he chooses to attend, from Mr. Clayton Duvall, the architect of the global ethics mesh system." At that very moment, a single black suit slipped into an empty chair. It wasn't Clayton, but Marianne Corday, GM's executive director, who had flown in just for this hearing. Eyes went wide, pens twitched, and people sat. Senator Ramirez nodded too. Marianne asked Ms. Corday to explain who Mr. Duvall is and why his signature is so important. Marianne stood up, calm and unfazed, and said, "Thank you, Senator. Clayton Duvall is the root signer of GEM, the Global Ethics Mesh, a blockchain-powered, immutable compliance platform. Any airline that wants to operate in participating countries or receive ESG-linked funding must maintain an active ethics signature from GEM. Mr. Duvall holds the only private key that can be used to do this." A gasp went through the room, and Ramirez raised his finger. "Miss Corday, in simple terms, what happened to SkyNorth Airlines?" Marianne took a deep breath. After being embarrassed in public on Flight 7-5, Mr. Duvall used his revocation power. Within minutes, $880 million in ESG-backed capital was frozen, and 6 airports stopped working with SkyNorth until compliance protocols were reviewed. This action is legally binding, and there is no way to appeal except for a full ethics review. And what message does that send to airlines and regulators around the world? Senator Ramirez tapped her pen against her notepad. Marianne looked around the room. Passenger dignity and corporate accountability are not optional, that ethics cannot be outsourced. Jonas Merrill paced behind closed doors. He had just come back from testifying and told his team, "Senator Ramirez grilled me like a cat with a mouse. A will subpoena Duvall if he doesn't show up him." The FAA, which is Selwyn's department, also wants to know if GEM's move can be enforced under U.S. federal law. Mark Liu, his VP of strategy, took a deep breath. "We need to fix this quickly. Stocks have been stopped. Bond grades are going down and down. We need either a law or a court order to stop what's happening." Mariel put his hand on his head. "Or we wait for Duvall to fix our signature. which doesn't look likely. Clayton took off his tie at Gem's headquarters in Geneva and looked out over Lake Geneva. Mariana, they came in with 2 mugs of espresso. She gave him a mug and said softly, "Heard you're in hot water?" He sipped, eyes steady. "They need to see me, but I have nothing to say. The system has spoken." She said yes. "For a follow-up, they want you to be in D.C. If you don't show up, Senator Ramirez will hold you in contempt." Clayton's face couldn't be read. Hold me up. Being moral isn't a popularity game. Marianne was unsure. Are you sure? Now is your chance. To say why silence is important? He put the mug down. When the time comes, they'll get their answer. In the afternoon, CNN Live cut to Senator Ramirez getting up to speak. "Today, we want Clayton Duvall to be clear." She said that he is still the only one who can get Sky North's operating certificate back. "We owe it to the millions of travelers." To figure out why GEM's clear protection of passenger honor was used as a reason to shut down a company. As she talked on social media, the phrase "hat justice is silent" became popular around the world. Headlines on articles said things like, "Black man's silence sparks global ethics revolution," and "From Harlem to Geneva, the man who holds airlines accountable." Analysts watched cable news to see if Duvall would break his silence. By late evening, Senator Ramirez's Washington, D.C. office was filled with carved wood and flight memorabilia. She pressed her phone's button. "Set up a meeting with Duvall for tomorrow and get me the text of his 2019 refusal to sell Gem that needs to be written down." That helped her out. "Yes, Mr. Senator." Ramirez sat down. Strong men think they can pick on one man, but sometimes the best move is to do nothing. The Senate Aviation Subcommittee met the next morning. He went into the hearing room. His back was straight and his face was calm. He wore a dark suit with the same brown coat folded over his arm and that gray scarf folded once and carefully tucked in. As he sat down in the empty chair next to Marianne, the reporters kept quiet. One flash bulb went off, and then there was quiet. Senator Ramirez blew her nose. "Mr. Duvall, you're finally here. Mr. Duvall, you're finally here. Will you tell this committee why you took Sky North's name away?" Clayton put his chin up. He spoke for the first time. "Senators and members of the committee, when I saw wrongdoing, I did what anyone in power should. There was no talk from me. The slap I got wasn't about a place. It was about what we think about who should be in first class on our planes and in our world. GEM was made to protect people's honor and make sure that airlines don't turn people away based on about bias. Skinnerth will lose their spot if they can't meet those standards." He took a break. The room was looked at, drawing attention. "When I'm sure they've changed, I will put their name back on. Not just with teaching, but also with real responsibility and open reporting to the public. For now, I'm going to be quiet." After a beat, there was applause from the crowd and a groundswell of nods from senators. The Council of Sky North even stood up. Instead of scorn, respect. Senator Ramirez put her notes away. "That was enough for us to know. Please accept our thanks for your time and leadership." Clayton gave a single nod and stood up. He left in the same quiet way he came in, leaving an echo that spoke louder than words. When Clayton got back to Geneva, the news stations had already shown the clip of his speech. "When I saw wrongdoing, I did what people in power should do." The world heard what the system had to say. It was a shock to everyone in the world of investing by Thursday afternoon. Firms, traders crowded around bright screens at Attendant Partners' sleek offices in London's Canary Wharf. There were news, clips of Clayton's hearing on the screen, and his quiet words could be heard in the fancy Senate room. "When I saw wrongdoing, I did what people in power should do. There was no talk from me." Eleni Cortez, a senior fund manager, looked at her team. "Check out our Sky North picture right now. I need up-to-date information on all of our ESG-linked positions." After a few seconds, tickers began to move across the bottom of the Bloomberg screens. Attendant Partners wants Sky North ESG bonds worth $50 million to be frozen for a short time. $210 million from the Orium Impact Fund has been marked for review. Green Trust Capital, $95 million, was put on hold until an ethics check could be done. Aero investors around the world have 32% of their money invested in Sky North stock. Trading stopped. Helena rubbed her forehead. He walked into that hearing as Clayton Duvall. There were no tricks or showboating, and this is what happened. There was no need for a news release. He didn't need to say sorry, just talked through Jim. CEO Richard and KO watched the same feed at the Orium Impact Fund across town. His office had a view of the weather, but today, he didn't even notice the view. He hit his phone. Sky North is on red alert. Stop giving out any more money. Write a statement praising Mr. Duvall's guidance. In just a few minutes, Orium's PR team wrote a cautious remark. We stand by strict, unchangeable moral standards. Fact that Jem did what he did shows how important responsibility is in aviation. Richard sat back as the email was sent. We take care as we ride this wave, but we do it. Clayton went back to Montreux that night. The platform at the station was almost empty. It had been a long time since most people went home. He took the same route from the train station to his lakeside house, walking past cafes with lights on and chestnut trees. Marianne Corday was waiting for him inside. There are many pieces of paper on the wooden table, the investor calls. She asked. He said yes. There are 3 in New York and 2 in London. The message from Orium went up 30 minutes ago. The Adelines will come next by. Good morning. Marianne looked at him. They already like you a lot. He made 2 cups of tea. Praise doesn't matter. What's important is compliance and openness. Before I think about restoring Sky North's name, I need to see the results of their audit. He was given a printout by Marianne, reports from Adeline Partners on the basics. Their team thinks that all flight crews should have a full ethics audit by a third party. Metrics, incident reports, comments from passengers, and training logs are what they want. Clay picked up the paper and looked it over. Okay, that's a start. It needs to be true. The Geneva summit the next morning, asking for it. 2 days later, an envelope with a stamp on it showed up at the Geneva GEM office. On the inside was an official invitation to the upcoming Global Aviation Ethics Summit, which was put on by the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO. Clayton was named as the main speaker. He looked at Marianne. It's time. She wasn't. Sure. Are you sure you want to be the center of attention? Clayton put the note in a stack. I need to talk to them directly, not just in court or through a scandal. This is where the future is made. Marianne nodded. The look on her face showed both relief and determination. Up at the top. After 72 hours, the meeting hall at AO's headquarters in Montreal was huge and full of people from 52 countries, including airline CEOs, aviation regulators, and managers of investment funds. This was written on a banner above the stage. Ethics in motion, ensuring dignity in global air travel. Clayton took the stage to warm applause. He looked out over the crowd. Faces of doubt and hope faces, people who had seen his quiet change. He shook his head. Good morning. When I made GEM, I wanted to make a system that wasn't affected by politics or bias. Even so, it took a slap, an act of personal bias, to show that bias still remains at the highest levels. Not empty words or diversity training that is forgotten. After a few weeks, but clear, measurable metrics, today, we set a new bar. Let me explain what I mean. All participating airlines must post feedback from customers every month. Live scores with no changes made. Every case of claimed mistreatment automatically leads to a review by a third party within 48 hours. ESG funds will tie 10% of future payouts to how well they follow the rules. We create a global ethics council that is led by passenger advocates, not airline officials who take turns doing the job. You will lose your GEM signature and the chance to work with the next generation of impact investors if you can't meet these requirements. The crowd was stunned and silent. One by one, heads began to nod. The head of the Verdana ESG fund, Amamira Lewis, who was sitting in the front row, stood up. Dear Mr. Duvall, 30 ESG funds around the world agree with your plan. We promise to only give money to airlines that meet your requirements. The whole hall was filled with cheers. Clay sat down at a small desk in his hotel room that afternoon with a pen in his hand. The final draft of the Montreal Ethics Accord, which included all of the rules he had laid out, was signed by him. He took a moment to think, then signed again. Under a postscript, he wrote in his neat writing, "Silence should always be a warning that power without kindness is useless." CED, he leaned back, happy. It was the machine that spoke. Everyone would now pay attention. Marianne got the message that 72 airlines had agreed to the Montreal Ethics Accord at the GEM HQ in Geneva. She sent Clayton the email with just one line. It was heard. Clayton's answer, "Yes, they did." And that night, as he looked out at Lake Geneva, the Alps were in the background. He gave himself one of those rare half-smiles. The small wave he started with one silent act had grown into a big one that could change an entire business, and it was just getting started. Since getting on, she hadn't eaten. The cloth of her uniform was tight around her arms and made her feel stiff. She felt like 1,000 eyes were on her back every time she moved. Rachel crossed her arms and leaned against the bulkhead door behind the first-class cabin. She stared at the blurry video on her tablet screen. The same loop played again, this time with her hand on Clayton Duvall's cheek. It sounded like a hollow slap going through the house. Carla, the younger flight attendant, stood close with her arms crossed and a look of doubt on her face. The silence was finally broken by Carla. "Rachel didn't look up when I asked, 'Are you okay?' "No," she said in a low voice. Her voice broke so badly that it scared her. "I'm not." Just now, the captain led her softly to the crew rest area and told her to sit down while she waited for corporate to decide what to do next. She was meant to write out a report of what happened. Instead, she was sitting on a narrow bench with her head in her hands and her legs hanging off of it. She thought about it over and over. He didn't move. His eyes were calm, and the whole plane was silent as everyone watched her move. She had pushed her doubts aside, telling herself he was just another passenger until he wasn't. Carla moved closer. Rachel closed her eyes and said, "They've put you in a separate area until we land. You won't be on duty. I don't deserve to." "Be on duty," she said. She rubbed her arm and said, "Not after that. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" Rachel laughed out loud, and tears came to her eyes. "Clara, it wasn't a mistake. I meant to hit him. I lost it because I thought he was an intruder in first class." She broke down in tears and put her face in her hands. "I'm going to be fired. I don't even know why they're going to fire me." Carla sat down next to her. "Hey, pay attention. Everybody messes up sometimes." Rachel turned her head. This was not just a mistake. It wasn't a problem with the machinery. It wasn't an important matter. I gave in to my opinion. She tried to hold her breath by swallowing hard. "I was always proud of how professional I was. I've worked as a flight attendant for 8 years. I've never ever seen her cry so hard." There was a hand around her. "It's all right, get it out." Carly's shoulder held Rachel's face. She felt ashamed and small, like a kid again. She put her hand on Carla's uniform sleeve. "I saw him move so calm when I wake up. He wasn't mad based on the look in his eyes. I did it on my own." She stepped back and cleaned her face. "He didn't yell. He didn't call for help. He didn't scream. He did nothing but sit there." She looked at Rachel's face. She said in a soft voice, "He's the man behind Jim, who shut down 6 airports and froze in $880 million. Rachel slouched her shoulders down. "I had no idea who he was." Carla let out a sigh. "A lot of people don't. Not now. Not ever." Outside, the lights in the cabin buzzed. Plane flew as planned. A strange comparison to the drama going on behind them. Rachel played the tablet clip again. She saw the words come out of Clayton's mouth. Clear, calm, and not scared. "You didn't just treat me badly. You treated badly every person your airline has quietly turned away." His voice echoed and could be heard in the boardrooms, at the Senate hearings, and at the talks with investors. He had gray hair, a calm face, and one tear in his eye when she looked at him. One thing, that picture scared her. Then she shut the tablet and put it down on the bench. She whispered, "I deserve whatever comes my way." She shook her head no. You'll be okay, but you have to face it. Write your report and be honest, Rachel told her. Rachel turned to her, and her voice shook. Carla said, "The truth? He never." Yelled, "He never made threats. He just used the method." Rachel slouched. "I have no idea how to begin." Carla got up. "Start with the first sentence. I let my fear and bias get in the way of my training. From there, everything else goes smoothly." Rachel looked up with red eyes. "How I learned. After 8 years of learning about emergency processes, service protocols, and de-escalation, it's all been for nothing now." Carla sat up straight against the wall of the cabin. "She told me you were scared. That man looks strange. I don't know what he looks like in real life. You went with your gut." Rachel shut her eyes. "That is the exact issue. My gut was wrong." Carla thought for a moment. Then she said something. "Not sure. He might forgive you. He didn't look mad." Rachel laughed in a fake way. "Forgive me. He could turn off our whole airline. He had the power to stop us for days." "I don't think he wants to be forgiven." Carla ran her hand over her face. "Perhaps not, but he's human, and people forget." Rachel turned her head. "We'll see." Later, Rachel's comments and the CCTV footage from the galley camera were given to the corporate response team. Someone came to get her. Someone from Sky North's HR department staffing. Nicely pressed clothes and a calm attitude. He asked Rachel, "A written statement? We'll decide what to do next. You've been banned while the matter is looked into." Rachel gave a numb nod. Went with him down the small service hallway, past the galley ovens and trolleys, to the door that led to the outside. People gave her a wide berth as she walked into the main cabin. Some people looked away, while others stared. It was her wish to hide. She wished the ground would swallow her up. She wanted to go away. As he got to the door, he stopped and looked back at seat 1. A Clayton was not there. Said something slowly, like a shadow moving away. She was never able to say sorry. She never had a chance to say anything. She only had her shame. A week later, Rachel was sitting in her small, simple apartment, which was full of mementos from all over the world. She looked at her outfit that was hung over the back of a chair. The white shirt, navy skirt, and badge, which used to be a sign of pride for her, now felt like proof. It was her laptop that she opened and typed. A statement of flight attendant. Harris. Incident 725, August 14th, 2025. She touched the keys with her fingers. Then she started, "I let my fear and bias get in the way of my training and my duty of care. I was in a position of trust, and I broke it. I'm very sorry for that." She stopped and read the first sentence again. Again, her eyes became blurry. With a shaky voice, she added, "Every word is a confession. I will get training in sensitivity and bias. I will volunteer for more passenger outreach programs. I will work toward building trust, one honest conversation at a time." When she finally hit send, she let out a shaky sigh. It was a start. She didn't know if it was enough, but for the first time, she felt a sliver of relief. She had admitted her mistake. She had faced the system. And maybe over time, both the system and the man she had wronged would see that her silence had been replaced by accountability. Because sometimes the hardest step toward justice is admitting you were wrong. At home fronts around the world, the story was clear. Passenger dignity had just become the law of the sky. In Brussels, officials from the European Commission's Directorate General for Mobility and Transport gathered in a conference room with a view of the Grand Place. Sitting across from them were officials from the International Civil Aviation Organization, the Federal Aviation Administration, and the newly formed G12 Aviation Ethics Council, which is made up of aviation regulators from 12 countries, a banner behind them that said, "Passenger Ethics Accord, a new era of flight integrity." As the cameras rolled, Fatima El-Bashir, the European Commissioner for Transport, tapped her pen thoughtfully. She began, voice resonant. "We promise to follow a standard that puts the customer and their worth at the center of our business. No longer will assumptions or bias determine who goes where." George Phillips, the administrator of the FAA, nodded across the table. "The U.S. will do the same. Starting right away, All airlines working in the US must follow these rules. To Fatima's left, the head of the G12 Council and Director of Civil Aviation for Japan said, "This agreement binds 72 airlines across 5 continents. There is no choice but to participate. It's necessary to do business in these areas." The passenger ethics accord will be enforced by a clear compliance dashboard that anyone can view. Clayton Duvall was back in Geneva. In the GEM operations hub, I watched the live feed. Streaming compliance data from around the world was watched by hundreds of researchers and data scientists. As soon as the Brussels announcement was over, screens all over the room came to life. 72 airlines have signed the Passenger Ethics Accord. The agreement includes rules about how to report incidents online and how to get reviews of any claimed wrongdoing within 48 hours. 10% of all money given to airlines is tied directly to how well they follow the rules. Aiden gave himself a small nod, but Marianne Corday leaned in. Silence says louder than words. At the same time, Jonas Merrill walked around Sky North's newly renamed Ethics and Compliance Center in New York, which had a glass wall that looked out over Midtown. He called Mark Liu, VP of Strategy, and asked, "Mark, have we changed the titles of the training modules? We need to have the basic rules of passenger ethics ready to go by Monday." Mark Liu answered, "Yes, sir. We've updated the code of conduct, added new bias awareness scenarios, and built ads good. I want every flight attendant, pilot, and ground agent in the world to know that we're responsible for this." He turned to Ivy Tran, who had just joined him in the office, and said, "Ivy, PR is pushing a 'We're Taking Responsibility' campaign. I need your approval on the legal disclaimers." Ivy looked at the draft and said, "That's fine. Just make sure we don't weaken the essence of the accord by adding too many caveats. Let them know it's binding." Jonas agreed. "Let everyone know that we're not just signing a paper. We're changing the culture." On the Heathrow Airport floor, customer service managers huddled around a tablet that showed the live compliance dashboard. Head of Ground Operations Amelia Curtis tapped the screen. This month, there were no reported incidents. Score for passenger feedback was 4.75. She smiled and said, "We're ahead of the curve. If only we'd had this in place years ago." Martine, her colleague and a veteran baggage supervisor, shrugged. It was better to be late than never. It saved us from having to deal with awkward situations at the gate, as proof that Sky North was now following the rules. A green checkmark appeared next to their name. Across the Atlantic, an independent watchdog called Aviation Watch held a live-stream town hall meeting with a panel of passengers who had experienced discrimination in flight. The moderator asked, "Now that the Passenger Ethics Accord is in place, do you feel safer boarding any plane?" One who used to teach 68 said, "Absolutely. Before, I felt like no one saw me and that I didn't fit in first class. I think I might finally get the respect I deserve now that there is responsibility." A 63-year-old former flight attendant added, "I worked for decades without training on unconscious bias. With this agreement, my grandchildren can fly without worrying about being judged," the panel wrote. The comments were full of relief, hope, and the belief that all air travel could be more kind. Back in the GEM hub, Clayton He got a message encrypted from an old friend in Johannesburg. "Your accord has been accepted by the African Civil Aviation Commission. 14 airlines will sign by the end of the quarter. You've created a global ripple." He closed his eyes for a moment and thought about the letter he wrote months ago. May silence always serve as a reminder that power without compassion is meaningless. He let out a small smile. By evening, the Accord's story was all over the news. The New York Times, 84 airlines around the world, Clayton Duvall's silent revolution changes the rules for airlines. Finally, something to protect the weak was shared on social media, and I was proud that my airline signed on. One man's quiet power changed the whole sky. Clayton and Marianne sat down for tea in a quiet cafe near Lake Geneva. Ducks paddled lazily outside, and the hubbub inside felt far away. Marianne watched him. "You've done it. You forced an industry to face reality." Clayton sipped his tea. "It wasn't me. It was everyone else watching in silence. They talked through their signatures." She nodded. "What's next?" "The Accord sets the stage, but culture takes time." He thought about it. "Now we watch, we improve, and we respond whenever we see a red flag anywhere." Marianne smiled. "Your letter was right. Power without compassion is meaningless. Let's make sure that compassion guides every click of that signature." New flight attendants sat in a group and talked about their experiences. A 25-year-old trainee spoke up and said, "I didn't know I had biases until this training. I'm glad you showed us how to check ourselves." Another 34-year-old trainee added, "I just flew a woman who looked lost in first class. I remembered the deal. I was there for her and told her everything that was going on. That's exactly why we're here," their teacher, who was wearing a new tag that said Passenger Ethics Fundamentals, said with a nod of approval. Ever late that night, Clayton sat at his desk in his Montreux cabin with a pen poised over a blank page. He needed to outline the next part of the Accord, the Passenger Empowerment Initiative. He wrote that there should be an anonymous dignity hotline for incidents in flight. Public reports every 3 months on compliance trends and scholarships. For underrepresented future pilots. He paused, then added one last line. "Let's keep the sky a place of possibility for everyone." He put down his pen, looked out at the moonlit lake, and let the words sink in. Clayton found the envelope on top of his desk when he got back to Montreux. That afternoon, it was on cream stationery, had no return address, and was postmarked from New York. He slid it open and took out a single sheet of lined paper. The handwriting was clear. "Dear Mr. Duval, my name is Sophie Williams. I'm 9 years old, and this is the first time I've ever flown first class. My dad said it was because Uvi saw the news, and I know you never yelled or raised your voice. Just stayed calm. I did the same thing when the flight attendant helped me buckle in and offered me orange juice first. I wasn't too small to sit here. Thank you for making sure no one treats me like I don't belong. Love, Sophie." Clayton's heart clenched. He put down his tea, folded the letter carefully, and looked out at Lake Geneva. A child 9 years old, sure of himself enough to sit up front because of one quiet act. He went to his desk, got a thin notebook, and wrote quickly, "Dear Sophie, thanks for telling me your story. You helped me remember why this work is important. No one, no matter how big or small, should ever feel like they don't fit. I'll keep an eye on the skies because of you, to make sure that everyone, no matter what age, can fly with respect and honor. John Clayton E. Duval." He put a stamp on the letter and gave it to Marianne. She said she would mail it that night. After a few days, Rachel Harris sat in uniform again. But this time it was the new training version that had messages about traveler rights and strength sewn into it. In the past 2 weeks, she had gone to sensitivity workshops, listening groups, and bias simulations. She had worked hard for 8 years, but they were also the most honest. Her boss had planned for her to take a short flight from Newark to Boston on her first trip back. Not first class. She asked to sit in the front row of the economy class so she could practice the new rules on every customer. As soon as she got on, she felt her old weight of the outfit. A tourmaline blue that was a little tight around the shoulders, and then the lighter, it's a more purposeful one that made her remember why she had come back. She took a deep breath, greeted each person by name, and asked them directly if they needed help. A girl around Sophie's age stayed with her mother. At eye level, Rachel asked, "Hello there, what's your name? Can I help you with your seatbelt?" The girl looked at her with interest, and then smiled shyly as Rachel helped her buckle up. Rachel then thought of Sophie's letter about a child who had been told she could fit in. She stood up straight, determined to be the kind of flight attendant that everyone now wanted and needed. In New York, at the same time, industry experts logged into the new passenger empowerment dashboard. This was the next step that Clayton had described. It kept track of 237 anonymous calls to the hotline for honor in the first week, and all of them were answered within 24 hours. Scores from passengers every month, with an average of 4.85 across 84 companies. Review by a third party, 95% of the work was finished within 48 hours. Diversity on the flight teams led to a 27% rise in reports of satisfied passengers who felt the system was fair. Alina Cortez at Adeline Partners looked at the live data as they went by. She leaned back in awe. This is real information. It's not any filler. Clayton made more than just a code of rules. He made responsibility a part of the code. Jonas Merrill and Ivy Tren look at the same screen on the floor of Sky North's Ethics Center. Jonas showed the line of the number of early intervention. Cases going up. Check this out. 9-5 solved in less than 2 days. That's not as bad as some tech helplines, Ivy gave a nod. This means we're going to turn the ship. Customers trust you again because you are being honest. Both of them took a quick look at the next column. There were 14 passenger empowerment. Programs started on 5 continents. In real time, alerts showed up. Clayton looked at Sophie's file and his records in Geneva. He added a letter. Get young people involved. Think about a prize fund. He looked at Marianne. Let's rid a passenger. Essay contest, which is our next project to inspire people. She smiled and got to work. The Alps shone in the late spring sun outside. There was a chorus of movement inside, made up of the soft beeps and hums of the servers. Rachel quickly sent a message to Clayton's public inbox that night. Subject: Thank you, Mr. Duval. Even though I flew in economy today, I felt the same. Sense of worth that you did. As I trained, I saw Sophie's letter and thought of her the whole flight. Thanks. Rachel Harris, airport worker, Sky North. Marianne made a copy of it and put it in Clayton's notebook. He smiled softly as he read it next to his window. Past enemy who is now a friend with the same quiet goal. He closed his eyes and whispered, Silence is not empty. It echoes through. Every act of kindness after, people were starting to understand what silent power really meant in hundreds of cabins and boardrooms around the world. For every Sophie and every Rachel, the sky had become a place of possibility because one man chose not to speak out, that he had to speak up. When he could have yelled and let the system do it for him. He woke up to the news that Sky North's CEO had quit because of an ethics scandal. Booking platforms had taken Sky North off of their lists. 3 major banks had taken 740 bomb dealers off of their credit lines. Clayton Duval sat at his kitchen table in Montreux, where the lake was sparkling with dawn light, and didn't move. The silence was as thick as ever. In New York, before the markets opened, Sky North's board held an emergency meeting in the conference room on the 32nd floor. Jonas Merrill stood at the head of the table with his face down. I can't in good conscience ask our investors to ride this any further, he said quietly. I'm tendering my resignation effective immediately. The directors nodded in agreement, and within minutes, the airline's communications director released a statement saying, Sky North Airlines announces the resignation of CEO Jonas Merrill. The board thanks him for his service and promises to rebuild trust. The head of commercial partnerships was on the phone with Expedia, Skyscanner, and Airfare Hub down the hall. I'm sorry, she said over and over. I understand. We'll turn off the API, and from 8 a.m. onwards, no one will be able to search for Sky North flights. At 8:02 a.m., the first platforms went dark. Expedia, no results found. Skyscanner, Sky North, not available. Okay, Airfare Hub, we're sorry, no carriers match your criteria. Within 30 minutes, all flights would be impossible to search. At Heathrow, people trying to check in for European connections were told, please contact the airline directly. On Wall Street, trading stopped abruptly and Sky North's ticker symbol, which used to be bright blue, turned gray. Credit default swap CDS spreads widened by 450 basis points. 3 major lending banks, Global Trust, Farrell & Capital, and Northern Credit Union withdrew $740 million in committed lines of credit. An unresolved ethics breach. A Bloomberg alert went off. Sky North was suspended from the NYSE. The CEO resigned. Funding lines were frozen. And analysts were scrambling. This was the first time that an ethics revocation led directly to sweet exits and a lack of capital. In London, at the headquarters of Arium Impact Fund, CEO Richard and Ko watched the breaking news on PA speakers set up above every desk. Phones rang, and traders grabbed their headsets. He leaned into the microphone and said, start our secondary allocations of that $210 million. Redirected carriers with perfect compliance records. When the market bell rang, Orium's portfolio was already rebalanced. Sky North was already in bad shape. By midday, the world's press had picked up on a single story. Clayton Duval, the man who froze an airline. Profiles of him appeared in The Economist, Leon, and The Wall Street Journal. With his thumb pressed to a small black device and the words he didn't raise his voice, 65 and serene, Duval showed that real power can be shown through systems. In an airport cafe at JFK, two executives from a rival carrier watched. The coverage on a tablet, it's a dangerous precedent, one said while swirling his coffee. If someone can shut you down with one call, it undermines the whole industry. His partner shook his head, or it saves it from itself. Back in Geneva, Clayton looked over a press roundup on his secure line. Marianne Corday handed him a 94% of travelers approved of the agreement. UNESCO will look at GEM as a model for other industries. He looked at the numbers and then tapped on one of the headlines. Sky North's Fall, a case study in silent accountability. He put the tablet away without saying anything. That evening, Isabella Chang, the new interim CEO of Sky North, spoke to reporters in their small corporate briefing room. We deeply regret the incident on Flight 725 and the subsequent failure to uphold the dignity of they. Promised a full third-party ethics audit and the immediate reorganization of our leadership team. Reporters yelled questions. Will you sue Jim for damages? When can Duval restore your ethics signature? Chang paused. Our focus is on moving forward and making sure this never happens again. Clayton stirred his evening tea and thought about how quickly things had changed. An individual he had never met quit, and airlines closed their sail engines, and banks slammed their doors. He took a deep breath and called Marianne from his front porch. The world's quietest earthquake, he said. She laughed softly. And now they're asking if we'll expand GEM's reach into shipping and rail. Clayton smiled. Let them wonder. For now, we keep the sky honest. He opened a new page in his notebook in his study and wrote, Part 10. Note to self. When quiet turned a fleet upside down, that was the end of the book. He put down his drink, closed his eyes, and looked out at the lake. The sky was clear again, but everyone knew things would never be the same again. By the time Chapter 11 starts, there is no doubt that the aviation world will never be the same again. In Brussels, a new ceremony was taking place under the same vaulted ceiling where they signed the passenger ethics accord for the first time. The last signature was added to the revised agreement, which was now called the Universal Passenger Integrity Treaty. 72 airlines had already signed, but today was the official start of all 94 airlines operating in G12 markets and beyond. Across the table, George Phillips, the administrator of the FAA, put his signature next to the U.S. seal, the chair of Japan's Civil Aviation Authority followed, and then delegates from Canada, the UK, and other countries joined. Each dot on the paper meant a legally binding promise. Immediate posting of passenger dignity metrics on public dashboards, required third-party ethics audits every 3 months, and no tolerance for any kind of discrimination in boarding or seating. Fatima raised her hand and said, "This treaty is more than policy. It is a promise that everyone who steps onto a plane, from New York to Nairobi, will be treated with the respect they deserve." Back in Geneva at the GEM Operations Hub, Clayton Duval analysts saw compliance rates going up. 96% of the world's carriers agreed to follow the new rules within 48 hours. And the last 4%, a small group of regional carriers, said they would do so by the end of the month. Marianne Corday joined him at the console and said, "We've never seen anything like this." Other industries are calling for GEM's framework next. Shipping, rail, even hospitality. Clayton nodded and said, "Silence guides change better than words." Streets trading floors were buzzing with a different kind of activity. ESG funds that had stopped investing were now approving new capital. The Verdance-rated airline ETF was up 13%, and global ethics mesh fund inflows were up $400 million in 24 hours. Analysts on CNBC agreed that the UPIT had changed the risk model for airlines forever. In Chicago, at the headquarters of a major aircraft manufacturer, engineers and executives met to talk about changes to cabin design that were prompted by the treaty. One engineer said, "We went from designing luxury to designing dignity." At the same time, retired school teacher Harold Jenkins in a small town in Texas got an email with a link to the public compliance dashboard. He clicked it, and saw that his favorite regional airline had a 4.9 passenger dignity score. Harold smiled, because he'd flown that airline twice last month and was greeted by name each time. It was about time, he told his wife. He finally got the message. That night, Clayton and Marianne raised a glass to quiet revolutions while drinking simple mineral water in his Montreux study. The treaty document lay on the desk, and its embossing caught the lamplight. Marianne raised her glass to the moment. Clayton smiled at every handshake signature and the silence that made it all possible. He looked out at Lake Geneva, where the moonlight rippled across the water. For him, it was a moment. It wasn't about fame. It was about the many people who would now be able to get on a plane and know without a doubt that they belonged. And in that silence, the world found its voice. Clayton Duval got back to Montreux just as the sun went down behind the Alps, casting long shadows across Lake Geneva. The train station was quiet, and the air smelled of early summer flowers. Duval only had his briefcase and a small, worn-out leather satchel with him. Inside was the last copy of the Universal Passenger Integrity Treaty, which was already stamped official. Around the world, digital records are kept. At home, he put water into a simple china teapot and set it to steep. He then sat down in his favorite armchair by the window, which faced the lake. The water was still and peaceful, reflecting the last pink of the sunset. On the small flat-screen TV across the room, the headline read, "GEM Treaty Ratified in 94 Nations." Clayton Duval refuses all interviews, so he watched as clips played. Of airline CEOs signing the treaty and happy passengers getting on, there was nothing explosive in the video. It just showed a flight attendant kneeling down to help a child with her belt buckle. He lifted his cup and smelled the jasmine tea. He then took a slow sip, and the warmth spread through him. A soft chime from his satchel reminded him of Sophie's letter from weeks ago. He reached in and pulled out a stack of hand-dressed envelopes, with thank you notes from passengers, flight crews, and even a few because of you. My daughter was able to board without fear. Your silence taught me what respect really means. I flew again, and I wasn't invisible. He laid out the letters on his lap and read each one slowly, letting their sounds settle in his mind. The moon rose higher, making the lake silver. He looked back at the treaty's digital text on his tablet and saw metrics. Dashboards, compliance graphs, and green checkmarks he'd never dared imagine. When he first came up with GEM, it had 96% compliance around the world. Over 200,000 incident reports were turned into training opportunities. And 100,000 passengers who used to feel left out were now included in every flight. He leaned forward and clenched his fists. For a moment, he let himself think about the strange series of events that led to Rachel's apology. Sophie's shock, the senator's thanks, and everyone holding their breath. Then he put the tablet down and picked up his pen. On a new page, he wrote one last line. Justice whispered. Everyone heard. He closed his notebook, set it on the side table, and stood up. He walked to the window and watched a single boat glide across the dark water. Its small light bobbing like a beacon, he whispered to himself. We did it. Only the lake could hear him. He went back to his chair, lifted his teacup again, and let the silence fill the room. After the treaty, the world had changed. And he felt the utmost satisfaction in knowing that for everyone getting on a plane, belonging was no longer just a hope, but a sure thing. He put the cup down, and the soft sound of the porcelain hitting the wood made him stop. Share your story below. Have you ever been judged because of how you look or your age? What happened and how did you handle it?